there, welcome to this Marsh Reviews tutorials video. We're going to show you how to change the rear tyre. This is going to be a bit more daunting because you've got chains and derailleurs and stuff in place, but I'm going to show that it really isn't daunting at all. Nice and simple and straightforward. First thing we've done is tip the bike over. Just make sure it's nice and stable. Give yourself a good working situation. Second thing is just take a note of which gear you're in, because you actually want to spin it down. See, there's a very little gap at the moment here, which makes that very tight for getting the chain off and on. So we're going to just spin the pedals and change the gears to bring it down to the lowest cog. It just makes it a whole lot easier to get the chain on and off the wheel. Okay, so that's done. You can see there's now a lot more room, and it's going to make it a whole lot easier to lift that chain out when we take the wheel out. Next thing, we are going to, if you've got rim brakes, you're going to have to disconnect the cable so that the caliper releases. We've got disc brakes on here, so there's no extra work to do on that. But the next thing that we're going to do is undo the wheel. Now, that'll either be, this is this little bolt cover we've got here. This has got a quick release on it, but normally it'll be just a couple of bolts, 17 mil or something in that vicinity. They do vary. Work out what size, and you'll be undoing the bolts with a spanner. You don't have to take them all the way off. You just have to loose them. As I said, this one's got a quick release. So it was up like that. We just let that off, and then holding the other side, you can loosen it off a little bit, but so that we've got play in here, so it's loose and no longer holding. And then it's a bit scary as to how much is holding, but you'll see that wheel now actually just comes straight up and out. And from there, you can phone a friend, get someone with a bit of help, but if you see there how it's going to lift straight up and out and forward. So if we lift out, you can see that that chain, oh, I've got a bike stand in the way, that chain is going to come straight out like that, and the wheel is out. So it really is very simple. Looks complicated, isn't complicated. So the next stage is to let the air out of the tyre. You need it to go totally flat. Now, there are two different types. You've got the car style valve and then the little narrower bike style valves. If you've got a car valve, then you can get a little tool like this, or your punch repair kits might have something like that. And we can actually unscrew the valve and fully deflate the tyre, because we're wanting to replace the tyre, but we're not wanting to replace the tube. So we're going to be careful that we don't pinch or puncture the tube in any way as we get this out. The tube's fully deflated. We're going to be taking the tyre off. We're going to need something to lever it off. Look, sometimes on my son's bike, I can just take it off with my fingers. On this bike, they're tighter. We're going to have to get a lever under it. The whole focus, you don't use something metal, and the whole focus is actually about protecting the tube that's inside the tyre. So I'll show you as I go. We'll start away from the valve so it doesn't get in the way. Yeah, okay, we don't need a tool to lift that over. That's tall enough. Some you will need the tools, some you won't. We lift that around like that, and then holding the tube in place, we then lift the tyre over the top, and that is off. So then reversing, again, as I said, all the time taking care not to be damaging the tube, pinching it in any way. We're now going to reverse the procedure. Okay, for the direction of rotation, you've got to work it all out, because this is upside down and you're changing things around. But basically, when your bike's upside down, the direction of rotation, you need your on the bottom of the bike, you need it pointing towards the back, or on the top of the bike, you need it pointing towards the front is your direction of rotation. Okay, so the best way to protect the tube is actually to put it inside the tyre to start with. And then you're fitting the tyre, now you don't get any creases or whatever in there. It's very important that the whole thing sits flat and smooth like that. But now when we're putting the tyre on, we're not putting the tube under pressure and lifting it over and things like that. Okay, so then once you've got it here, you put your valve in place, and then start to fit the tyre on. And when this one here is deflated, it really isn't a challenge at all. It's just going to sit in place, and we know the tube's in good order and in good position. So we just bring it up one side at a time over that edge. And this new tyre is a bit tighter. It's not a stretch. I can still pull it over by hand though. There and There we go, just working on the ends. And there we go. That is on and fitted. Just make sure that your valve is not pulled horribly in any direction or anything like that. And the big thing to check is that the tube, you can actually feel it, is not pinched, not twisted or anything. And that is ready for inflation. Then you can put it back on. And it's going to work out better for you if you put the valve back in before you pump it up. It will actually pump up, but it won't hold the air without the valve. Just put sometimes these are longer and thinner, but this little bit here with that bit of metal out the top goes on the outside. That goes up inside. It gets your little screwdriver fitting. And screw it back in place. So at this point, the only tool that's been needed has this to get the valve in and out. But depending on your tyre size, you may need the tyre levers like I showed you to get this up and over the rim. All right, valve's on. So let's pump this tyre up. Got a little inflation kit here. I'll send you a link. And I'll send you a link to a good one actually. This doesn't have a lever. You get even more control when you've got one with a lever. So I'll send you a link to a good one of these. Excellent to have with you when you're riding. But this one is just controlled by turning the bottle in and out. Oh, then that's right. You puncture it. You screw it in like that to puncture it, and then you screw it back out. But I'll send you a link to a better one. Just making sure that's all in place. I'll send you a link to a better one, which has got a little valve you can turn backwards and forwards. There we go. That is pumped up. How simple is that? And if you haven't seen these before and know about them, have a look at the link in the description. Brilliant for pumping up your tyre. Even to save pumping them up at home, these are quite cheap, the extra CO2 bottles. And you see that's pumped up good, hard, ready to go. Okay, so putting the tyre back on, the important thing is just take note of what side the brake's on, what side the derailleur is on. If you come around this side, because the only thing complicated here, you can see the slots in the bike. We're going to drop it into these slots both sides. The only thing is getting the chain in the right spot. Okay, so we're actually going to make a loop in the chain here. This is under the derailleur, and we're going to put the sprocket into that. That just goes over. And put it onto the same gear that you took it off, because then the derailleur will line up nicely. Just need to sit him on like that. And then this drops down into the slots. There we go. Now, when it comes to centering your wheel, the best place to check it, obviously you make sure it's sitting down and centering there. You look at your chain pattern, make sure that it's right, coming around. But the place to center your wheel is actually up here. You look at the gap between the frame and you make sure the gap is the same on both sides. If it's out of alignment, then you need to reset it back down here. So this is your checkpoint to make sure that the gap there's, then you'll be running true. So now it's just a matter of doing up the bolts, then them up nice and tighter. If we've got a quick release like we have here, hold one end, spin the other end up tight, and then pull the quick release over, go a little bit tighter.
And talk about getting the disc in alignment with your brake pads too. That's really important.
And obviously you've got to make sure there's two brake pads, one on either side, so you make sure that they're both still in place and that the disc is set back in the center. You haven't banged or knocked anything out in the process. But again, so you see this here just needs to be a good level of tightness without being crazy tight, and that's just a matter of tweaking this. You can turn at this end to loosen off the thread. That's a little bit too loose, so we do it up a little bit. Okay, that's good there. I like these quick release handles to be pointing backwards. If they're pointing forward, they can hook on a stick or something and possibly undo. That's just a personal thing. I like them pointing backwards. Then there's no chance of it getting hooked up on anything. But then give your wheel a run. Obviously go for a low speed test drive, test your brakes, test your gears, but that's done. Tyre's fully changed.